Okay. Uh, Welcome to the first of a series of videos on the United States government. I really didn't want this channel to be all about politics, but considering what's in the news lately, it seems to be the subject we're going to have to start on. I'm going to break this up into a few videos because there's a lot to cover. And before we get right into the finger pointing and what's up now, we need to get some baseline standards in as far as what our country is supposed to be, what we're supposed to expect from our politicians, and um, just some general stuff like that. Because a lot of people throw around uh, big words, like liberty and freedom and all these other great sound bites, and then they start talking details about what they want and what they're doing, and you're like, I don't think I don't think that means what you think that means. Anyway, so going back to the beginning, before the Continental Congress, before the Constitution was even written, um, we had the Declaration of Independence. That's where we decided that the existing government we were under was not acceptable, and we had to stand up and fight. And the first thing that the Declaration of Independence says is that all men are created equal. That's their big, rude gesture that they are making to their the countries that they're shaking off, um, to tell them that we're not going to stand for what you're doing. And the all men are created equal is a good proverbial wisdom, in that it applies to a lot of things, and through the decades it has been applied to um, all manner of inequality, racial inequality, gender inequality, um, any minority who feels uh, to be slighted in any way. You come back to that. But when the Declaration of Independence was written, when they used it there, our forefathers were not quite as socially evolved as we are now. So they were slave owners. They were kind of outspoken in the thought that women shouldn't have a vote, things of that nature. So when they used the phrase that all men are created equal, you don't have to be much of a historian to go back and figure out what they were talking about. They were talking about the social class system, the idea that noble or royal bloodlines or families were better than the common people, and that the laws could uh, treat them differently. And it might be a chicken and the egg question to say whether you got the favoritism first and that made the people wealthy, or whether the people were wealthy and that got them the favoritism. But by the time we were leaving, it was all about the money. Um, so in a more modern term, we were talking about wealth inequality, the fact that these people could um, buy their way through the government and get away with whatever they wanted to, and the common people and the peasants weren't even allowed to own land. They were really caught the brunt of everything and had no representation. Um, Now, there are specific historical incidents, the Boston Tea Party, stuff like that, where we're just concerned about representation involving being taxed and things like that. But the bigger picture and the kind of the idealism is that in all men being created equal, and that should be all persons, not to be um, the is the idea that the representatives in your government should treat everyone equally, which is to say that you know your either Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates should have the exact same influence on the government as Charlene, the barista down at Starbucks, you know, because they're all one person, and each person gets their one vote and their one say. Um, and it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, you should not be able to influence the government more than someone else. And there have been a lot of problems come up with that. Even with the things like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, those initially, 250 years ago, um, it was freedom of speech meant going to Central Park, standing on your soapbox, and saying your piece. And you couldn't be held accountable for what you said in terms of being drugged off, thrown in jail because you disagreed with the politics of the day. Freedom of the press, yeah, it may have cost you a few pennies to get some flyers printed up and spread them around, but it was still within the reach of everyone to do that to some effect. Come around to modern day, now, yes, everybody still can say what they want, everybody can get a flyer printed up or post a blog on the internet, but all of those things are now, their effectiveness can be amplified with money. And that becomes a problem because now it's not each person has their own voice. It's somebody wealthy enough to dump money into whatever advertising campaign can amplify their voice exponentially over top of people who do not have money to throw into those campaigns. And that's not equal representation when you start looking at you know, super PACs being used to finance politicians. Yeah, they're not giving the money directly to the politician. It's someone's free speech to say that they like this politician and put out an ad in that politician's favor. But you have to be pretty naive to say that that's not blatantly influencing and affecting the people of the country. You're not pushing people into office with the use of money, which is something that the government is expressly supposed to prevent if we're going to have a honest representation in the government. So again, I'm definitely not advocating for any kind of censorship. I think censorship is a bad thing. Freedom of speech is very important. Freedom of press is very important. But the use of money to make it, to weaponize it in a way that dilutes the common man's ability to speak or be heard is a problem. And it's a problem that I don't have an exact answer for it. This channel is about having your own opinions. So here you go. This is a question that you can think about for yourself. And if you have an idea, let's hear it. Put it in the comments. Start your own channel. Let people know. Talk about it. Ask your congressman to do something about it. Not that they're motivated to change the existing system, but they like to act like they're important. The next thing to consider in politics and with anything is the way when rules are set down, when somebody defines a new structure, a new um, way of doing things, like like take for example like sporting events, basketball, football. Uh, the game is simple. You take the ball from one end of the field, you go to the other end of the field, you try and score. The other team is doing the same thing. They're trying to get a hold of the ball, go to their end of the field, they're trying to score, and that's the game. And kids can play that on the playground all day long. Um, but there's a problem when the need to win is more important than playing the game correctly. And that's where you start seeing things like tactics start to evolve, where now all you got to do is get 1 point ahead, and then you're not trying to score anymore. You're just trying to sit on the ball and prevent anybody from playing any further until the time runs out. And that kind of breaks the game when people kind of start taking these out of the box ideas because they work. They're not technically against the rules, but the game's not being played anymore the way it's meant to be. And with the government, it was a new government. We had a bunch of these great ideas come out, and they knew that things like this would happen, which is why our government is supposed to be adaptable, why it can make amendments, why it can change laws like that. But the idea that everyone gets a vote and has a say in their representatives kind of gets hijacked by this formation of political parties, because your political parties are gaining kind of they're monopolizing specific um, political ideas, and instead of that vote being divided between multiple candidates who all have the same idea, you weed all those out first and get down to just one candidate, so you concentrate more votes to that group. The problem is the political party is their own group. They're not really you anymore. They're not, um, they have their own thing on the side. And yeah, you can say, well, there's primaries where you vote for the political candidates to narrow those things down. But even before the primaries, there are the nominations for the primaries. And part of the nominating for the primaries is based directly on the politician's ability to pull together campaign financing. So before you get the chance to vote on who's going to represent the political party, they've already been filtered by who can pander to the people with the money to get the campaign financing. So the people who are already on your primary voting list they've already been biased to favor people who have money. So when you do go to the polls and you see this list of names, you're like, wow, there's just not a good choice on this list. There's a reason for that, and it's because the system has evolved on its own, and nobody's corrected it. Nobody's come up with a way to fix that, or at least it hasn't been implemented in a way to fix that. And the other problem with political parties is that your political parties don't go away. I'm pretty sure it was Thomas Jefferson who people like to quote as saying that having a Democratic Republic is great, and can be maintained by overthrowing the country every 20 years or so. Not that I am advocating any of this, January 6th nonsense. That's not what it's at. But that's kind of what has been implemented in term limits. Politicians only stay in office for a few years, and then they're out and have to be voted in again. So anybody who you think is corrupt, or anybody who's that's supposed to get washed away. The problem is when you get this other body over here on the side as your political party, you've got somebody else making decisions, and your politicians are now sock puppets who are just repeating what the party says. And you don't really have a way of getting rid of the party. They've monopolized too big of a group of votes to really unseat them without a bigger project than most people can pull together. And that's harsh. I mean, that's bad for America, because you can hear the politicians when they're talking. Some reporters get them cornered on a question, and it's like they can't answer that question until they run back to Big Brother and see what they're allowed to say, because their party tells them what they are and aren't allowed to stand for. Okay, but that's not what your politician is supposed to be. Your politician is supposed to be the person you voted for, and he's supposed to be there representing you, not representing a political party. That's that's something that's directly in their oath of office, I guess, has been a good reference point to fall back to. When you take your oath of office, all your oath of offices are pretty much the same, whether you're, at your, councilman for your local town or village, or, senator for the state, is you've got, that you swear to uphold the Constitution, and then that kind of like nesting dolls, you go from the Constitution of the United States to the Constitution of your state to the laws and ordinances of your village or town or city or whatever you're voting for, in priority. And then it's, after you swear to uphold all that, then you swear to do the job of your office to the best of your ability. And then the big word that comes at the very end of these oaths is that you will do the job impartially. Now, for anybody who isn't sure what that means, and for anybody who's a politician, and most politicians obviously don't know what that means, pause the video and go look that up. Because being impartial is an important thing to understand. Nowhere in that oath does it say that you will show favoritism to a political party. In fact, nowhere in that oath does it say you're supposed to show favoritism to anyone. That's what being impartial means no favoritism. You are an official. You are a government official. And it is your job to do your job impartially. Now, again, with the sports metaphors, I don't want to keep falling back to sports metaphors, but in sports, the officials are the ones in the black and white striped shirts. Now, you can imagine what it does to the game if the guys in the black and white striped shirts start trying to make one team win or the other because they like that team better. It wrecks everything. And again, the actual game that you're supposed to be playing doesn't work anymore. Your politicians, their job, they uphold the Constitution, blah, blah, blah. They will do their job, and they will do it impartially. Their job, which is defined by whatever constitution for whatever tier of government they're in, is, they are accountable to everyone in their district or region or whatever. And that doesn't mean everybody who voted for them. It doesn't mean everybody that they think can get to vote for them next time. It doesn't just mean eligible voters. You're accountable to the children. You're accountable to, if somebody doesn't even live in your state and they're driving through your town, if your police can, hold them to your laws, if they can, be given a ticket, you're accountable to that person while he's there. And you have to treat all of these people fairly. And that's something you don't see. Again, this is where the politicians are more concerned about being reelected than they are about doing their job, because they're concerned about who's going to vote for them the next time they come up. So they don't care if they ignore 49% of their constituency, as long as that other 51% is going to vote for them. They just need to keep that 51% happy. And that's not representing 100% of your people. And again, the concept of the country in general was never that, democracy doesn't mean 51% of the people get to bully and oppress the other 49%. That's not what our country's for. Our country was so that everybody from everywhere, all of the immigrants who came in from different locations, from different religions, could all manage to live together. And that was the focus of government, was to make everyone live together. Not make everyone live together, but help everyone get along. So the laws were all about, finding the middle ground and finding a way for everyone to work together. And as a representative, of people, you have to recognize that, you may have two different groups that don't get along. You're not here to pick a side in favor of that group. You're here to offer solutions for how to get those two sides to get along in your area, in your region, and all the way up to the federal level. There's supposed to be this kind of unity. It's we the people. It's an indivisible nation, and that's what your politicians are supposed to be doing for you. So, I mean, I think that's probably enough for this video. I think we've covered a lot to wrap your head around. Just, we're supposed to have a government that is not influenced by money, and we are supposed to have politicians who are trying to help everyone get along, instead of, trying to make them pick sides, team red, team blue, and the entire country is trying to, wipe out the other half of the country. If they were just doing their job, if they weren't selling out for money, and if they weren't trying to polarize you with one group or the other, wouldn't it just be so much easier to live in this country? Again, your thoughts on that, go ahead and put those in the comments, and we'll talk about it. And again, I don't have answers for everything. I don't know how to solve all these problems. I'm just trying to bring to light some of the things that seem to be overlooked and forgotten, and and the things that you should be able to verify for yourself. Okay? If I don't make another video, you should at least be able to take some of the things that we said here and start some conversations of your own with your friends and come up with some ideas. And Can't say that, what's right for you or not, but I was on my village council for years. I was mayor for 2 terms. Um, and I learned a lot. What I thought I knew going in wasn't the same as what I found out as I went through it. But um, it's worth doing to be involved. Even just showing up to the meeting. You don't have to be a councilman. You don't have to take on any responsibility other than just showing up and hearing what they have to say. Because you can raise your hand and ask questions. You can point out things that don't seem right to you and let at least your local representatives know. I mean, you can write letters to your congressman, but those are mostly answered by secretaries and people that never forward it to the actual congressman. Anyway, like I said, this is going to be a multi-part video or series. Um, there's a lot more to cover um, just on how our government should be working. Some of the failing points, and it's not like you're doing something wrong failing point. They're just things that don't have great answers. Um, and we just have to talk about, what they have done and what they haven't done, and what needs to be done differently. Like our voting system is largely based on the fact that we were doing this all with pencil and paper 250 years ago. And there are other voting options for us now that technology allows. And I'm not saying that, like computer voting machines are a big thing, but as opposed to something where you would get a list of candidates, that instead of just picking one that you want to win, you would prioritize them and you'd score them in order from the one you wanted the most to the one you wanted the least. Because that allows for a much more accurate selection, and it allows you choice, which is kind of implied what the political parties are doing in the primaries to consolidate choice, but they take that choice away from you. Whereas if you could just select in order of who you like and who you don't like for your candidates, that can be done. It would be difficult to do that with pencil and paper, but it would be very easy to do that with modern counting. Anyway, we'll go over that more in another video, and hopefully there'll be some interesting feedback in the comments. I want to keep an eye on that, and I guess this is where I'm supposed to tell you to like and subscribe, but only if you actually like it, and only subscribe if you want to hear more of it. Hopefully we'll see you then.